Hello Internet, today I would like to talk about St. Patrick. I would like to say that after watching this video, you will be well informed via a talk featuring uncontested primary and secondary sources and academic rigour that has produced a consensus of the man's life. However, no such consensus exists. As with most of Irish history, there are various competing versions, and as time passes it would seem that the fabled Ministry of Truth from Orwell's 1984 is indeed at work, editing and revising the story and consigning anything that does not fit the current narrative to the memory hole, which makes the search for truth at best complicated and more likely impossible. So, with that in mind, I shall attempt to impart my knowledge and give those interested this caveat. This should be seen as either a best guess or a starting point to do your own research. Yes, if any of you do find the divine truth, the comment section exists for a reason, and please share your knowledge. It is very welcome. Let me begin with the uncontested proven facts. On the 17th of March, people from across the globe seem obsessed with wishing anyone remotely connected with Ireland a happy St. Patrick's Day. It was these messages that prompted me to put my thoughts on St. Patrick on record. On this day, the wider world wraps themselves in green, or an Irish tricolour, and drinks themselves into oblivion. The Chicago River gets dyed green, as do some other rivers in the United States of America. Buildings get illuminated green, Guinness gets new customers, as black beer is the choice of the day, and on the 18th of March the world wakes up with a collective hangover. That happens. These are provable, observable facts. However, everything else is a matter of opinion, or squabbled over. What follows now is my 2 pence worth, and you can collectively pick the bones out of it. I will start at St. Patrick's grave, which would, in normal circumstances, give a reliable date of death, probably also of birth, which would in turn fix this story into a set time frame and geographical location. However, it is not quite that simple. While they can say, in Downpatrick, there is indeed a giant slab of stone which allegedly covers the grave of St. Patrick, with a date of the early 5th century. I know this is there. I have visited this site. However, this is not conclusive. Quite apart from the date being somewhere within the span of 100 years, Naomi Wishoff of Mahon University, I'm sorry these words are a bit hard to say, but they're in leprechaun language or whatever, but this is the pronunciation I have. But anyway, this lady, who apparently is educated, has this to say about the matter. It is claimed that Patrick is buried outside Downpatrick Cathedral. A large granite stone marks the spot, placed there in the early 20th century to prevent pilgrims from taking fistfuls of grave soil away with them. However, the tradition of Patrick's burial at this location is influenced by late 20th century propaganda, decided some 700 years after Patrick's demise, by the Anglo-Norman John de Courcy. Understanding this deep-rooted appeal of the cult of relics and the importance of the saints as patrons to the local people, de Courcy staged the discovery of the relics of St. Bridget, Clonkill and Patrick in 1185. People, some of these pronunciations are in some of these names are in leprechaun language, otherwise known as Gaelic. I really don't understand it, and I'll do my best, but I'm going to butcher them. He exhumed their bodies and transported the relics to a new tomb at Downpatrick. This process of discovery, or it says here translation, I'm going to say transportation, was a common feature of the cult of relics since late antiquity, and was famously populated by Ambrose, Bishop of Milan, c. 386, when he wished to build a new basilica. Indeed, the Shrine of St. James finish line in the increasingly popular Camino de Santiago de Caballero was created after the miraculous discovery of the body of St. James at the politically expedient juncture in the region of the monarch Alfonso II in the 9th century. To add to the confusion, there are reports that there was a battle for Patrick's body between the Unlad and the Unil. One theory is that the two warring tribes agreed a truce when they came to a river that had swollen, and neither tribe could have successfully got the body across without the assistance of the other. While another school of thought is that to prevent the shedding of blood, both groups were led astray by an illusion and the mercy of God, and neither could lay claim to the body. Given that both these versions require cooperation between factions whose descendants are still divided to this day, and the first casualty of war being the truth, I believe that it is entirely possible that both clans buried a body somewhere, which would cause some level of uncertainty about where Patrick was indeed buried. However, if that's not enough confusion for you, one cannot discount the two Patricks theory. Irish academic T. F. O'Reilly proposed the two Patricks theory, which suggests that many of the traditions later attached to St. Patrick actually concerned the aforementioned Palladius, who Prosper of Antiquities Chronicle says was sent by Pope Constantine as the first bishop to Irish Christians in 431. So who is this Palladius? Palladius was the first bishop of the Christians of Ireland, preceding St. Patrick. The two were perhaps conflated in their many Irish traditions. He was a deacon and a member of one of the prominent families in Gaul. Pope Constantine I consecrated him bishop and sent him to Ireland to the Scotti believing in Christ. Scotti being another name for the Unlad we previously mentioned, who had a battle with the Unils over the body of Patrick. So everything is, as normal in Ireland, clear as fucking mud. Those of you paying attention will notice I use Wikipedia for that source. While I know the site is unreliable and needs backed up with secondary sources, for historical names and dates it is generally safe enough, and this shit is complicated enough without causing myself unnecessary work of finding approved uncontested links for everything when I know that none are actually available. So, as of now, we are not sure about the date of his death or his burial, but he's definitely a saint, right? Actually, there's a slight problem there. Although Patrick was venerated as a saint in Ireland from the 7th century, he was never formally canonised. It wasn't until the 1630s that the 17th of March, the traditional day of his death, was added to the Catholic breviary, a book of prayers, as the Feast of Patrick. On the plus side, the hangovers that occur on the 18th of March, the day after his traditional death, and by traditional I mean invented date of death, are indeed real. Okay, so he's not really a saint, but he is the only patron saint of Ireland, right? Actually, that's a little complicated. The patron saints of Ireland are St. Bridget, also known as Mary the Gal, or Marie Nagulida, or also known as Our Lady of the Irish. She is one of the patron saints of Ireland, along with St. Patrick and St. Concubile. Of these three saints, at least one is canonised, as in having been officially made a saint by the Roman Catholic Church. I started looking up the information. I found out that St. Bridget was made a saint officially and canonised on the 7th of October 1391, and although I could not find a date for St. Concubine being canonised, I did find out that apparently he met the Loch Ness Monster in the year 565 AD. I would say at this point that you cannot make this shit up, but obviously, where Irish saints are concerned, some people are making some shit up. So my question is this: what did Patrick do to elevate himself not only above the other patron saints of Ireland, but above all other saints, to become the only saint that is venerated outside his home country? Well, I say home, but depending on your version of events, Patrick was either Scottish or Welsh, kidnapped and made to tend animals for 6 years before escaping, returning to his family, and then coming back to Ireland as a missionary in the late 4th century, or possibly early 5th century, because nobody's got any actual data. So the one thing that we are clear about is his nationality was definitely not Irish. The two most famous legends attributed to Patrick are as follows. First, he used a shamrock to explain the Holy Trilogy. A shamrock, also known as a three-leafed clover, is common across Ireland. Apparently, Patrick said that each of the 3 leaves coming from the single stem was akin to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and could exist in the one plant. However, he failed to understand that if you put those 3 leaves in different locations, you no longer have a complete shamrock or clover. So there is that. The other thing he is accredited with is chasing the snakes out of Ireland. The legend, when taken literally, is problematic, to say the least. The first thing is, there are large parts of Ireland, well, most of it to be honest, that Patrick never visited, so he would have needed to do that by remote control, as it were. The second being that there is no evidence of Ireland ever containing snakes, and it is believed that the Ice Age would have done Patrick's job long before he ever arrived. However, if we take this story not literally, but as a metaphor, and add in the fact that Druids or pagans of that era used the symbol of a snake, things begin to make some sense. The oral history I learnt as a child growing up in Belfast, Northern Ireland, is that this story is about Patrick bringing Christianity to Ireland and removing the Druids. While it is clear that one man working alone is not sufficient to complete the task, and therefore Patrick's story has been manipulated in some way or other, it is also clear that Patrick has been bestowed with the credit or shame, depending on your thoughts, for that action. I would say that the Druid pagan religions in Ireland were removed so successfully that those wishing to continue those beliefs are now working on their best guess as to how those religions worked. I am not alone in this belief. And I quote, "This idea is based on a theory that the snakes which St. Patrick allegedly drove out of Ireland in the 5th century CE, whatever the fuck that is, because the last time I looked there was BC AD, which meant before Christ, after death, and this CE thing is popping up all over the place, but whatever, are actually a symbol of the Druids and their religion. This is not a far-fetched idea, considering that the serpent is a common symbol for the Christian devil. Apparently, according to scientists, there weren't any snakes in Ireland at that time. In fact, there have been snakes in Ireland for over 8,500 years. The Ice Age performed the reptilian eviction, or the slaughter, as it were, not St. Patrick. Therefore, the offended serpents had to have been something else other than the actual snakes, and many modern pagans have taken the snake as a druid metaphor to heart. For example, as Pizzle Waters noted, author Isaac Bonsbotts called for the day of All Snakes Day and penned songs calling for the return of the snakes. Personally, every time I see a St. Patrick's Day parade, I would love to be among a band of brothers dressed as snakes who could chase Patrick out of the fucking parade. It is my premise that this is the reason Patrick is venerated around the world, that the celebration is doused in alcohol, that his achievements are not front and centre, and that while I can find the Wild Hunts article about an article that got traction in 2012, I cannot access the original article where an educated person puts forward my perspective. It is in the memory hole, along with many others that do not fit today's current narrative, or indeed the oral history I was taught on the streets of Belfast. My biggest takeaway from this process of creating this video is this: today's culture of sell me a link or it didn't happen is A, making us lazy, B, making it incredibly easy for those in authority to change history, and he who controls history controls the past and the future, and C, you might all want to start teaching your children what you know before those facts change.